Hello and welcome to What to Read, and this time I'm going to talk to you about one of the prominent satirists of Hindi literature, Harishankar Parsai, and an article that he wrote in the context of 26 January 1972. And this was titled Bharat Ko Chahiye Jadugar or Sadhu. So this was a satirical piece that he had written. It was a reflection of the 26 years of independence and how the government at that particular point had progressed. And Harishankar Parsai was a very famous satirist, and most of his work came during the time of Indira Gandhi's regime, and he was very, very critical of the government at that particular point of time. This piece is also written during that era, soon after the India-Pakistan war, and he starts off saying that these days whenever he opens a newspaper, there are only two kind of people who he sees proliferating. One is the Jadugar or the magician, and the other is the Sadhu. Every day, he says, the newspaper publishes about some new Jadugar, some new magician who has come on the scene, or some new Sadhu who has come on the scene. And then he goes on to describe the various characteristics. He says that Garibi Hatao, which as most of you would know was Indira Gandhi's flagship program. He says that when the Jadugar comes wearing wearing a patch on his eye and tries to drive a motorcycle, then all the Garibi Hatao Janta that is usually trying to find ways to find employment will come and stand there for 3-4 hours and get entertained. And he says that these kind of magic tricks are continually being done, and he feels that magic tricks are an essential part of governance. So he comes up with this scenario where he says that, where he concludes that the India-Pakistan War of 1971 was also an elaborate magic trick. So he says that he feels that there will be another Shimla agreement soon, where Bhutto would perhaps come to the table saying that I have tried everything, but there's still poverty in my country, and there is still strife. Indira Gandhi would also say, yeah, there is a lot of poverty even in my country, despite all the schemes that I announced. So he says that eventually Bhutto and Indira will come to an agreement, and they will say that let's have one more magic trick of a war, and so that our public forgets about all of these things. So he very satirically presents about how political magic tricks are kept to distract the public. The other thing he says for this kind of a distraction is the sadhu or the saint, and he says what the saint does is another level of distraction. There are long queues at the ration shops. There are multiple problems that people face. What the sadhu or the saint does is that he starts to tell people that the problems are just in your head. They don't exist. He tries to tell people that the entire world is mithya, or some sort of an ephemeral thing, and that is why we should not be focusing on either the problems or the solutions. So that is also another way of befooling people or distracting them, is what Parsai says. Parsai concludes saying that this is a very nice trick to keep people engaged and distracted from the real issues, and the only thing that this country probably needs is more saints and more magicians, so that the public remains engaged for years and years, to decades and decades to come, and none of the issues will eventually get resolved. So these were the kind of thoughts that he had at the 26th year of independence, and if you look at it, even today the situation is not very different. Every time governments across the world, when they are faced with something critical, when they have to go to the public with something, there is a convenient distraction that is given, and that has been the kind of tactics used by governments across the world, not just the Indian government over the years. The question, of course, that Parsai wants us to think is, why are we as the public still falling for these distractions?